Freddie Highmore, we knew that Norman had to kill his mother. That's the way it goes in the movie. But wow, I think you certainly took the breath away of people like me with that final episode. It was one of the great hours of TV. It was yowza. Well, tell us what you think of it all.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, it was quite an end to the season. It feels like we've held the secret from everyone for the entire year. You know, we know what's going to happen at the end, but you can never quite tell people. Even at the end of 9, there was the sense of, well, she might actually still be around. And I think now it's actually happened and gone out on air. There's a sense, it feels for the first time real, that the show will take a pretty big change of direction next season and reestablish an entirely new relationship between Norma and Norman.
But the finale of this season, I think, was so shocking to fans like myself, and this is one of my favorite shows on TV and has been for years, that I think what really threw us about it is its kind of emotional honesty. But by that I mean, you guys could have chosen to just rush through the final steps, but no, there was the chapel scene at the funeral home that went on, and Norman gives this poetic, wonderful speech, and he's got orchestrated his own mother's funeral. Then I think at the very, very end, when you're at the house and you've dug up her corpse and you've got her on the sofa and you're pinning back her, gluing back her eyes, and all this stuff that was so, it was like walking on the edge of a cliff for you guys as storytellers, because you could have lost, it could have been too much at any one point, but it wasn't. It was just so raw, and the scene would go on, and then that crazy guy would show up at the door, and it was like, wow, it was amazing.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. It was, as you say, I think the key of that last episode was playing it straight. And I know that Norman this year has been a bit more manipulative and a bit more Machiavellian, and at times lies to people and knows how to play people off by saying the right thing. But the last episode was entirely genuine. It was just his real emotions coming out, and this idea that he had from the beginning that, yeah, my mum's, she's going to come back. She's going to be there for me. This is all part of some plan. And I think you have to play that straight, and there can't be any sense of, especially on this episode, of a sort of sly wink to the audience, or because then the whole premise kind of falls apart. If Norman isn't completely committed to it, then no one will be. And that's what makes it so heartbreaking, is that he and satisfying, I guess, at the end, is that she did come back for him, and that he was right all along. But yeah, the gluing the eyes over, it's also the dark humor, I think, that Karen has been so brilliant at bringing out in the show, and especially on that last one that Kerry wrote, the railing at the photo to her, and Norman's kind of little smug look when he's got the ring, and the fact that they just have this fight in the future. It's all so bizarre, and slightly heightened, yet has to be grounded in an emotional reality.
The easy thing to have done, and this is what I assumed would happen, was we know that Norman, of course, has to end up with her body, and he's into stuffing birds and stuff, so he's going to preserve the body. But when you know that's coming, that's been the fun of the whole series, is we know it's got to get to this place that the movie opens in, the classic film opens in. So how do we get there? So you think, as a fan watching the show, I say, well, all right, so she's going to die. I don't know how they're going to kill her off, but Norman will simply refuse to give up the body. He'll just refuse, because he can't part with it, and maybe he finds that he has the legal right to do that, whatever. But no, what you guys do instead, of course, is he goes through the ritual and then digs it up at night. And I thought that was so cool, because that was a Norman thing to do, and it's a great Gothic thing to do, if you're digging in a graveyard at night if you're telling a story.
I know. I just remember when he gets the idea to do it. He's sitting on the bed and he's like, when are you coming back? And then he realizes, oh, maybe it's me. Maybe I'm the guy. He's so deluded. It's so poor Norman. But he's like, oh, great. This is gonna work. Like, this is the way to bring it all together, and it suddenly seems so simple to him, and he never doubts it. He doesn't, and because it's so intimate, their relationship, and they're very much, obviously she has gone, but they're very much truly in love, and that brings with it a sense of not caring about what other people think. He doesn't mind in any way how people are viewing him in that last episode, because he thinks that he knows this secret and that no one else is in on. You know, it's what Norma's relationship has always been about, and that's what it returns to in the 10th one, is that no one else can really understand them. But that doesn't matter, because as long as they have each other, things will be okay. So people are, you know, everyone's kind of laughing at Norman that he's only one who's going to the funeral and that he's sitting there on his own. But for him, that doesn't matter, because it's about him and his mum, and he's doing what he genuinely thinks is right.
And when he kills her, when he releases the gas throughout the house and goes up and lays down beside her in bed, he's taking his own life. He's assuming at that point. And what's going through Norman's mind at that moment, let's have some clarity here, is he thinks in his warped mind that she's killed these people, mm-hmm. and that he's doing a mercy killing, right?
For which you mean at the end of the night?
He believes that Norma has killed, because your dark side is not fully apparent to Norman. That doesn't he believe that she killed the girl's mother at the hotel? They found the earring. Yeah. Dylan's girlfriend.
It's interesting because I think there's two ways of reading it, and it's almost because he sees them both function in many ways as one, that it allows for the possibility that he may have done it himself. You know, he puts the robe on, he looks at himself in the mirror, and maybe there's a sense of even greater self-awareness in that moment where, as you say, either he realizes that she has killed Audrey, or that potentially he's done it himself. But he knows that he's aware that one of them has done it, and he doesn't need to be sure who, because it's such a heartbreaking revelation for him. And when Norma comes home, it's even more so, that they're both just so broken and so at their lowest points that he's going to do what he believes is right, and that his sort of last act of love for the two of them, and the only way that he thinks they can be happy is by moving to Hawaii. You know, by taking both of their lives and living that dream.
You had two prominent crying scenes this season. One was at the hospital when you plead with the doctor to let you go home, and the other one, of course, is when you dig up Norma and you bring her back home, and you can't believe she's not waking up. How do you do those scenes? Because when we see TV watchers, film watchers, when we see crying scenes in the films, they're often fake. They're often, you can imagine the actor quite easily doing it, quite frankly, with all kinds of camera tricks and stuff. You didn't have that as an option. You had little speeches to give each time that the tears came out, and you had to really get into that place and perform those scenes. How hard was that to do?
I never find the crying scenes to be necessarily the trickiest ones. And I think, I mean, if I look back, and the sort of hardest thing, of course, there's an emotional weight of number 10, and a certain toll that it takes on you, kind of running around and carrying bodies, and, as you say, breaking down. And there's an energy expended behind that. But in a way, that's so genuine and an emotion that everyone can identify with, that I sort of lock onto something that you've felt in your life, and looking at this body, and Vera was incredibly still, that looks dead, is a frightening and yet emotionally terrifying thing and revelation. And I guess trickier stuff in episode 5 perhaps of this year, when we have to see Norman transition from Norman into Norma. And that's something that's inherently a bit we're more skeptical of as an audience, in terms of, oh, what do you mean he's just like turned in one moment into another, into this other person? And so I think, finding solutions to those transitions, and giving it the space and the time, which Kerry and Carlton always did. I think that it's when that scene in episode, which was a really long, one of the longest scenes that we have ever done on the show, when Norman stands up and goes to the door, and we see him become Norma, and assume her personality and character. I think that's inherently something that we're more likely to question as an audience, and to not see as being entirely believable, because it's not something we relate to on a daily basis. And so it's, as Kerry and Carlton were so good at doing in the edit, it's finding that space and allowing the time for that transition to take place, so it happens genuinely. And I guess finding that on camera, and the nuanced stuff in that way, was perhaps more challenging and new this season. But yes, of course, as you say, then at the end people are like, oh, but you cried so well.
Well, they weren't just any crying scenes. They were really something. Hey, how do you make Norman sympathetic in general? Do you have a strategy? Because this is a serial killer, a complete whack job. How do you make us care for you in a sympathetic way? And you do that, but how do you do it?
I think people always need to know what Norman is genuinely feeling, and I think that's become harder as time's gone on, because, as we were saying earlier, Norman can manipulate people and deceive people and lie much better than he used to be able to. But I think as long as we know what's actually guiding Norman, what's going on deep inside, then we can't help but feel for him, because I think inherently he's just this boy who wants to, he goes back to being that little boy who wants his mother, and wants more than anything to be happy, and in order to be happy he needs to be with her. And so I think as long as everyone is reminded of that being his central goal, he's not he's not, as we saw at the end of episode 8, when he has an axe in his hand, he doesn't want to kill Romero because he doesn't want to be that person. He's not striving to be this serial killer that ultimately he'll become. And I think because he tries to be a good person, that's something that will hopefully keep him sympathetic. He's trying to often just do the right thing, which is tragic too, because he's not, but he thinks that he is.
From the very beginning, the network was great with you guys and gave you a commitment to the 5 seasons, so that regardless of ratings, they believed so much in this. And I think everyone was glad they did, because that gave you the security of knowing that the story was not going to be pulled out from under you at any one point. And now, as we head into the home stretch, how much do you know? Obviously, you can't say here, but how much do you actually know of how they're going to set up the final stretch? We know that, all right, so Dylan's off in Seattle or wherever he's up there. We know he's got to come back at some point. His life has to be in danger. Romero is going to be in danger. He's going to, now that he's wise to Norman, he's going to be, if he gets out of jail, be flitting around, and his life will be in danger. We know some of that setup. What do you know?
Lots of fun stuff. I was really lucky in this last season to be a part of the writing team and write number 8. Kerry and Carlton were great at sort of letting me into the room, and so because I'm a part of that process again this coming year, certainly I'm aware of the certain.
Oh, I didn't realize you were part of the writing process now. Wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, that's been incredibly exciting about this past season too. But it definitely feels fresh and new, and it's reestablishing these new rules, and lots of that is gonna take place in Norman's mind, because she is actually dead, and so to him he's not, and so how will that manifest itself throughout a whole season? It's incredibly exciting, and also to see what Vera does with with a new version of the character that she's played masterfully over 4 seasons, and should rightly be celebrated for this season, because that is the end of Norma Bates in that fashion.
Yeah. And now when we see her in the future, of course, it'll be through Norman's invention, and she won't have the doubts, the haunting, the negativities and stuff that made her a flesh and blood character up till now, because Norman won't see that himself. I know. Well, good luck to you. Thank you so much for 4 seasons of absolutely tremendous TV that I think just excelled itself in so many ways this past season. Wow. I can't imagine how you're going to
very much
wrap all this up.
I know it's been, it's sad that it's coming to an end. Suddenly you finish the 4th season, you're like, oh, there's only one more to go. But I just feel like this last year has been, you've got this fantastic payoff from the setups of the first 3 years, that it feels worth it, that certain things had to be held back, and now these last 2 seasons, it's just sort of letting everything go. And I wonder whether if you just see 9 or number 10 if you just sort of saw 8, 9, and 10 as a run, maybe it would have a meaning, because it's so well written, and Vera's fantastic in 9, but you sort of need those like 4 years of madness building up to make that heartbreak even stronger at the end, and you think, wow, it's actually happened, and I still sort of doubt it myself. Yeah. And
just the way that how they let the scene breathe, of when you're going around the house and closing the furnace vents, and the Sandman song playing, and it was a great confident TV making. The fact that they let that play out so long, and it made us wonder, what is Norman doing? And then most other TV shows would have just rushed all of that.
Yes.
But you guys,
when did you become aware of his? It's this sort of chill of like, when do you realize what he's actually done?
I don't see. That's what I was wondering, and you can tell me. Later on, after the death, Alex Romero goes to that guy in the shop and says, "You knew about the furnace. When did you know? Why was Norma the only one you told, or me?" Or in other words, he wanted to know if Norman knew, of course. And was there a setup scene earlier in the series that we heard about the furnace? Because I was unaware halfway through when you were doing it, and then went upstairs. I thought carbon monoxide. I kind of figured it out, and then of course he confirms it. But how much of that was actually said before?
Well, I guess it was intentionally sort of disguised and left in the background, but still present. It was at the end of the episode before, when the house was freezing, and so everything had shut down, and and then Norman comes downstairs, and there's the maintenance guy, the furnace guy, is down there, and he's like, "Oh, I've just fixed this one, like, don't do this one." And he's put the sort of tape around, and then Norman says, "Oh, thank you," and he goes off upstairs, and then they have a conversation that's about something else. But I guess that's the setup. But I don't think that's the moment that Norman, that's more just in that moment, he's not like, "Oh, I'm going to go and gas us with our broken furnace." That's more an idea that comes to him later. But certainly when he's in the bedroom, and that sort of long last scene between the two of them is, deep down he knows what he's about to do, but he's at peace with it in that moment, and feels like that he knows that he's doing the right thing, and he's saving them both. And so it's with that certainty and decisiveness that he goes down and calmly does the last things that he knows he needs to do. But it is an act of love, as you were saying. What keeps him likable? It's not. Someone asked me if he were doing it out of jealousy, it's not that at all. It's not about Romero in that moment. It's not him trying to be the bigger man or the man of the house and can't bear to see Norma being taken off by this other man. It's just about the two of them. And
we know that deep down that Norma would have forgiven him and would have gone for the ride.
Yes.
In the sick little dynamic of their relationship, it would have been okay with her.
Yeah, and they're both just so terribly broken that it makes it makes sense. He's just trying to make things better.
Oh, great. Well, thank you so much, Freddie. Go win some Emmys. This show deserves 50 of them.
Thank you. Cheers.
Okay. Thanks.